Saquon Jones with the Boxing Voice. We got Steven Espinoza. How you doing, man?
Good, brother. How are you?
All right, so it's good to see you as usual. All right, so some hard-hitting questions here.
Okay, let's get into it.
All right, we're not going to talk about the Tank fight.
Okay.
So you're working with PBC. Who's the head? Who's the leadership of PBC right now? I think that most of the time you have this like sort of innuendo on why it's. I don't believe this to be so, but the streets, the boxing streets, are always saying PBC is not doing well because there's no one to turn to for answers. Who would you say is the leadership for PBC right now?
Well, I think that's a criticism that's always sort of been there. Mm-hmm. And everybody knows who's the brains behind PBC, and it's Al Heyman. It's always been Al Heyman. It still is to this day. Mm-hmm. A lot of people had their doubts because he isn't public. He didn't speak to media. He doesn't interact publicly with a lot of people, and that has always caused doubts. And the reality is, although people are in a little bit different role, I'm in a different role. Helping PBC with TV production. Mm-hmm. Bruce Binkow, Tom Brown, Louis DeCubas, still, being as active as they've been and being in the roles that they've been the whole time. If anything, I think part of it is a lot of the Showtime infrastructure mm-hmm. has been taken away. And I think to some of that, I think a lot of people equated that with PBC. Okay. So now that's been taken away, and everyone's like, well, where's all the infrastructure? PBC is still PBC, mm-hmm. And you've got guys with Tom Brown who have a lifetime in boxing, and Louis DeCubas who's had a lifetime in a second generation in boxing. And, so there's still really knowledgeable guys, myself, Bruce Binkow, Tom Brown, Louis DeCubas, Al Heyman, the Watsons. None of the faces have changed.
So another question, right? I was talking to Eddie Hearn at the Haney versus Garcia build-up. He said, and I quote, PBC is effed, and then turns around and worked with the PBC for Canelo versus Berlanga. What do you have to say with promoters who sort of badmouth the promotion company, but then turn around and work with you guys? But then there's no one to defend PBC from things like this. And I don't want to sound biased, but I'm just trying to give you, since you're with PBC, I want to give the opportunity. How do you defend against other promoters saying X, Y, and Z about PBC, but then turning around and working?
You know what? I don't think you need to defend because the proof in this pudding. Mm-hmm. If the PBC had no business that was worthwhile, no fighters that were worthwhile, and wasn't worth the time of day, then you wouldn't be coming to us continually, including this week, mm-hmm. For more opponents when your original plans and these big grandiose ideas that you have in your head don't come about. So the reality is, I think it shows weakness. If your number one go-to way to promote yourself and your business is to criticize others, mm-hmm. I think that shows weakness. I think it's a personal weakness. I think it's a professional weakness. Mm-hmm. If you've got a good product, you've got a good business, you talk about that. You lead with that. You don't try to down everybody else to make yourself look bigger. You just tell the truth about your product and you proudly promote it, and that's what promoters are. And I understand, look, some guys think that this is all part of a big show. Like, look, that part of this is, I don't know, professional wrestling, that we're all...
part of it is professional wrestling.
There is all of that, but, and maybe I'm old school, mm-hmm. But I don't like to see feuding promoters. I don't like to see promoter versus promoter. To me, that's not the story. Mm-hmm. Like, when it's promoter versus promoter, you're insulting all those fighters who are actually doing the work. It's not about one promoter against another promoter. It's about these fighters against these fighters. And I think that's where the focus should be.
But as a business person, at some point, you got to defend yourself. Like who is there? Are you guys PBC to turn the other cheek promotion where, who is the person we go to for answers? I'm assuming, we can now come to Steven.
Sure. Like I'll always talk about anything. You know that. Like I talk more than I should in many cases. But look, that's been a criticism of PBC, and mm-hmm. Maybe at times appropriately about the PR strategy. Ever since. But Al has got a very strong point of view about not being the front of the story, mm-hmm. not being there. Now, I understand, taking the spotlight is very different from sort of handling your PR and sort of, handling the public image. I think those are two different things. But I think, look, I think PBC has been largely turned the other cheek.
Okay, and last question. You'll have promotions like MVP who go from ESPN to Trilla, DAZN, and now with Netflix. Or you have Queensberry who went from Sky to BT to now to DAZN. So when those promotion companies go from broadcaster to broadcaster, the word on the street is that they are just moving on to better things. But if PBC goes from Fox to Showtime to Amazon, they're failing. How do you combat the sort of the mindset that other promotion companies are moving on when if PBC does the same thing, it's called failing? Do you understand what I'm?
Yeah,
okay.
no. There's plenty of examples where PBC does one thing and it creates a shitstorm, and other promoters do the exact same thing and no one really reacts. I'm not sure exactly where it comes from, and it's something. I think it's not the best development in sports, in boxing in particular. But you've got people who are sort of rooting for promoters, and sort of like on this particular bandwagon or that bandwagon or that. Again, maybe I'm old-fashioned. I'm fans of fighters. And if a fighter moved promoters, I'm still a fan of that fighter. It doesn't matter where Jaron Ennis goes, whether he's working with me or working with, Matchroom or my worst enemy or whoever it is. I'm always going to be a fan and supporter of Jaron Ennis. And, I think there's a lot, too many people who are looking at this and saying, look, it's criticizing the promoters and worrying about the promoters more than they're worried about supporting the sport and the fighters themselves.
All right, Taekwon Jones with the Boxing Voice. Once again, Steve, it's always great to see you. Thanks so much for answering the hard-hitting questions for the Boxing Voice.
Anytime, brother.
What up, YouTube family? Don't forget to hit that like button. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Help us get to that 1 million subscribers. We're on the road to 1 million. And obviously, we have other great content on our Patreon channel. So since this video is over, head on over to our Patreon and check out all the exclusive content or right here on our YouTube members.